Good afternoon and welcome to Conversations, a production of the Oakville Chamber of Commerce. My name is Tim Cadigan. I'm the chair of the board of the Chamber, but I'm also pleased to be your host of this weekly series. On today's episode, we are pleased to be joined by Dean Stoneley, President and CEO of the Ford Motor Company of Canada Limited. Mr. Stoneley has served in a variety of global leadership roles at Ford Motor Company, including those in sales, marketing, and service in Canada, the US, South Africa, South Korea, Japan, and China. Dean has a very challenging and interesting role. Ford is a very important player both in our local economy and provincial economy, and indeed in the economy of all of Canada. Dean, thanks very much for joining us today.
Tim, thank you for having me.
I have to say I'd much rather be having this conversation with us driving around in a Mustang, but we'll have to do with what we have for today.
Yeah, you and me both. I don't get out much these days, so it's great to be here with you today.
This is my big outing of the week. So I understand that Ford has restarted production and operations here in Oakville as of May 18th with some enhanced safety protocols. Can you talk to us a little bit about what it's like to get people back to work?
Yeah, we have. So the team has done an amazing job of getting our manufacturing up and running. It's one thing to take down a plant, but to bring it back up is the logistics involved in that is incredible, and getting the whole supply chain coordinated. And the team's done a wonderful job with that. As you said, Oakville came on board Monday of this week. We had a very smooth startup. We hit our production schedule. Our engine plants in Windsor came up last week. And that went very well also. And, we have the safety protocols, are pretty comprehensive. We've got a 64-page manual, and it's everything from temperature checks for all employees as they enter, self-attestations. There's a whole process that we go through. But, I will say that in a manufacturing environment like Ford, health and safety is really the backbone of the operation. It's everything that, it's in everything that we do. And so there's, putting the pandemic aside, there's so many safety protocols already in place that bringing this into that culture is a lot easier than, let's say, perhaps reopening a shopping mall or something that's a less controlled environment. But having said that, I'm really proud of the team, and it just feels great to be building cars again.
I bet. So with the economy has been shut down for months now, how has that affected the automotive market? I mean, there's the obvious things, but I'm sure you have a lot more touch points than what we're even aware of.
Yeah, so no one could have seen this coming, and the drop in sales. I think we're all getting tired of hearing the word unprecedented, but it clearly is. And if we think, I was here in Canada back in 08, 09 for the global financial crisis, and at its worst, we in 09 we saw the industry full year was down about 13%, and in fact Canada weathered that much more. It was much less severe than in the U.S. The decreases in the automotive industry were about double that in the U.S. So it was down about 13%. What we've seen this year, we really kind of fell off a cliff in terms of new car sales, and March was down about 50%. April was down almost 75%. So we've just never seen a drop like that before. So where we come out in the full year is we're still forecasting. I suspect it'll be somewhere around 26 or 30% down. So, just kind of double what we saw in the global financial crisis. So, clearly a massive impact to our business.
You said the word unprecedented, but in reality, 13% to 70%, that's staggering.
It is. And the good news in all of this is, I think clearly April was the trough. That's where we saw the 75% decline. This month will probably be down as an industry about 45% on new car sales. So we're starting to come out of it. Dealer showrooms are reopening or have reopened. Our service side of the business has been much more resilient. We're running at around 75% of our usual run rate in terms of servicing vehicles. And, that was deemed an essential service all through this pandemic. Keeping first responder vehicles on the road, police cars, ambulances, the guy that delivers your dinner, all of that is critical. And so that side of the business has certainly been more resilient. But I will say, the positive for me is we've outperformed the industry. And I'm really proud of our dealers and my team and how we've pivoted to respond to this crisis. And so, our reductions have been less than the industry, and therefore, from a market share point of view, this has been a real positive story for us over the last few months.
And I think obviously when we think of Ford or any of the auto manufacturers, we do think of the manufacturing process. And of course, as you just touched on, and I know you have close connection with your dealership network, there are just literally so many people employed in that industry aside from the manufacturing piece. And to see that effect on the lots, the people that are in sales or service or whatever, obviously it's huge.
It is, and I mean, so the complexity of this has been clearly the manufacturing is a big part of it. As you say, the dealerships, we have dealerships across Canada in virtually every community, about 22,000 employees across the country, and that's challenging because of the differences in provinces. I mean, I've heard it said that Canada is it's 13 parts that form a whole, and that's become really apparent during this, where each province has responded differently to the crisis. And so for us, managing this and wanting to have a standardized approach across the country has been challenging, as we've seen not just different provincial governments respond differently to those dealership businesses, but even cities. I mean, the cities within the province. And so that's been pretty difficult to navigate. But I think that the dealers have done a great job. I mean, our first and foremost concern is the health and safety of our staff, our dealers, and our customers. And so that's kind of been the default for us, and we've managed through that. But I'm feeling really good now that we're kind of coming out the other side and starting to see some normalcy in those operations.
You touched on the global financial crisis, and I think we're all looking for points in history that we can look to give us some learnings, give us some idea of what the future might hold. But how did the financial crisis and managing through that prepare you for the COVID crisis? Were there learnings you could bring forward?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was. I think the learnings from that were more about getting the economy going again. I mean, this was very different because the pandemic, like I said, it was kind of like the falling off a cliff. And I think we had a little bit more run up with the global financial crisis. And again, Canada was a little more insulated, right, in terms of the fundamentals in Canada. But we're looking at that in terms of now that we're looking at getting the economy restarted, some of those stimulus items that were critical. Liquidity is a really important aspect of our business. Most Canadians finance their vehicle purchase. They whether they purchase or lease, they finance it. And so Ford Credit does the majority of those financing loans. And so we need to sell those loans into the market. And the whole kind of ABS market, the asset-backed securities market, tends to freeze up during times like this. So back in 2009, the Canadian government, the federal government, came out with something called the Canadian Secured Credit Facility, where essentially the government started to buy those loans. And when they did, then the banks and everybody else came back into the market, and therefore we got that liquidity. And it was good for the government. I mean, the government actually made money off it at the end of the day because of the interest on these loans. So we're talking to the government, both provincial and federal, around some of these stimulus ideas, but liquidity would be a really big one for us. And that's a learning that we're taking from the 2009-10 timeframe and looking at how we can apply it to the market today.
We've been doing this series now for several weeks, and we've had political guests and business guests, and I think all of them have been based here in Canada. But your experience leading in various jurisdictions around the world is interesting. How has what you've experienced leading your organization in Africa or Asia prepared you for your role here in Canada now?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, we are a global company, and so it's wonderful to be able to draw on those resources globally. And I think the fact that I have been in those markets has helped me with, kind of not just with the real life experience, but also just building that network globally. And, when we talk about bringing our manufacturing plants back up, we run our manufacturing plants basically the same way all around the world, whether you go into a plant in Thailand or in China or in India for that matter. And so, we reopened our plants in China 2 months ago. In Europe, we reopened our plants on May 5th. And so we're able even to take those real-time learnings. I've stayed very close with my team in China. I was in China for 5 years in terms of both how they manage the dealership business, how they manage demand creation, e-commerce, virtual sales. And so being able to draw on that experience, because of course they experienced the pandemic sooner than we did, has been really invaluable to us as a company. To be able to draw on all those learnings and all those resources has been fantastic. So, we're not kind of going it alone here in Canada. We're leveraging kind of the best of the best from around the world. And that's been really great.
Over the last few months, we've watched as many businesses apply new business models. They've had to reinvent themselves and do business in very new and different ways. Many innovative solutions have been applied in various sectors. What do you think the current COVID situation will do for innovation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm spending more of my time thinking about that and working with my team around that. What is that new normal? And clearly, we're already seeing now the way that consumers are interacting with our brand, with our products, with our services is changing. And I don't expect that to suddenly end. I mean, I think if those of us, if we're thinking that this is going to just kind of return to the way things were, I don't think that's the case. I mean, that became very clear to me recently when I had to get my gardening supplies in the spring. I went on one of the hardware stores websites and I ordered everything. And it was just really amazing, the process they'd put in place. I could drive into the parking lot, the spaces were numbered. They delivered it right to my car. And, I drove away from that experience saying, pandemic or not, this is how I want to do business going forward. I mean, it's just the time save that's involved. So we're seeing that in our business as well. And we're shifting much more to virtual interactions, virtual sales. And we've kind of been able to hit a fast forward button on a lot of these things, if you will. And to me, I'm an optimist. And so I guess I'm looking at what are the opportunities coming out of this? How can we be better? How can we serve our customers better? And so things like pickup and delivery for service, our dealers have done an amazing job of picking up and delivering vehicles. We can deliver new vehicles right to a customer's door. Those vehicles are sanitized. All the protocols are followed. So these are things that we've done very quickly to deal with the current business environment. But as we come out of this, I think in many ways, these are just better ways to do business. And so I think that we'll see this continue. So I think there's a lot of space around that innovation. Things like pickup and delivery, these aren't new ideas. We've been talking about these for years, but this is a chance to hit a fast forward button. I mean, I think what might have taken us another 5 years in terms of changing our business model, our go-to-market, we've been able to kind of reinvent ourselves over the last 60, 90 days. And to me, that's been kind of an exciting journey. And, I don't want to, for a moment, ignore, just the awful toll that this crisis has taken on us as a society. But as we look at coming out of that, what are the learnings from this, and how can we do better as a company in terms of serving our customers? And so, to me, that's the area that we're focusing a lot of our time and energy.
If you're just tuning in, you're watching Conversations, a production of the Oakville Chamber of Commerce, and we are joined today by Dean Stoneley, the President and CEO of Ford Motor Company of Canada. What has Ford learned from living through this situation today? You talked a little bit, Dean, about some of the innovations you're bringing into place, and what strikes me is that I think some of the examples you gave maybe add convenience for the consumer, but I would wonder about the cost to business. So as I bring a service in where I'm going to deliver a vehicle, or if somebody wants to take a test drive, maybe the salesperson goes in a different vehicle. Some of those changes that we're making to how business goes, I think must add costs to businesses of all size, really.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think we need to look at the business model on all of these things. So using the example of pickup and delivery for service, right now we're offering that as a free service to the consumer. But going forward, that doesn't necessarily need to be a free service. These are the kinds of things that we need to talk through. Time is money, and people will pay for convenience. And so that could be something that we add, being able to go online and quickly book a service appointment, have someone pick it up and deliver it. There could be a surcharge or premium for that. Those are things that we have to work out. But I'm acutely aware of exactly the point you're making, is that we can't just sort of add all of these elements to the business and drive up the costs. for our dealers. And so that's something that we're very much focused on. And we're working with the dealers very collaboratively. We have what we call a national roundtable process, and it's a group of dealers from across the country. And we've been meeting actually every week during this crisis. So we're very connected with the dealers, understanding what's going on in their communities, in their showroom, and how we can roll out these types of initiatives in a way that puts the customer first, but doesn't walk past the realities of their business, to your point.
Before we went on air today, you talked about how you're communicating with the Ford network across Canada. I think anybody in a leadership position, and probably many of our viewers today, found the first 4 weeks perhaps of the pandemic the hardest. And so my question to you would be, what for you as a leader was the hardest part at the outset of the pandemic?
Well, apart from all of the sort of immediate concerns around the health and safety of employees, I mean, that was clearly our immediate concern. But just in terms of the changing the way we do business, to your point, it has been an adjustment. I mean, it's one thing to talk to a room of people and get that kind of feedback and interaction. When I'm started this thing out, I didn't even really have a home office set up. So I'm sitting at my daughter's desk talking to 700 people through an iPad. It's like, I never thought I would be doing that. And so, now it's become much more comfortable, right? To be able to just sit in this room alone and do these things. But it takes time. And, a lot of people say, well, it's more productive to work at home. And I think it is, depending on what you're doing. I mean, in a task-driven role, like if I have to put together a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation, then working from home with minimal distractions is great. But in a leader position, as you said in your question, your job is different, right? It's inspiring people, and it's going from good to great and transforming a business, and that's harder to do when you're isolated at home and talking through an iPad. And so that's been an adjustment for me. Talking to all of our dealers and employees without that feedback loop. And, it's kind of funny. I probably have some experience to get there. In university, I was a radio DJ, and I did the night shift. And so I used to sit there talking into a mic, and I never really knew if anybody was listening at 2 a.m. And it's kind of the same feeling that I had when I started on this journey. But, we're getting used to it. And, I think the more interesting thing is, what does that new normal look like? Does everybody return to the office? Do we have certain employees that continue to work at home? Do we flex it? Is there some kind of hybrid solution? And, an event like this really gives you pause to kind of look at everything. And, I think we all drive to work and get there at 8 o'clock every morning, and we've been operating that way for 100 years. And yet, we've had technology that's been around for at least 10 years that is there that would say you don't need to do that. You don't need to have everybody show up at the office at 8 o'clock. And this is that opportunity to kind of relook at everything and say, is there a better model? Is there a more cost-efficient model that we could have, with less overhead? And so these are all really interesting discussions, and we're working through that right now in real time.
I've been very impressed with the whole Team Canada approach, and lots of industries have jumped in to help the fight against COVID-19. Can you talk a little bit about how Ford has helped the COVID cause in Canada with PPE?
Yeah, sure. So specifically, it's a larger story than Canada, because we've been very coordinated globally on these efforts. But clearly in Canada, I'm really proud of our team here, specifically in Windsor, at our Windsor engine plant, where we're making the face shields. So these are the clear plastic shields that you would see in a hospital. And we're right now on track to make 2.75 million of those shields. We have great cooperation from our partners at Unifor, our employees who have volunteered to come in and work in an environment to produce these face shields. And, it's just been a really great reaction. We donated 100,000 within Ontario very quickly at the beginning of this crisis. Now that they're going nationally with the federal government. We also did something where we gave every dealer in the country access to these face shields. And it was a real good opportunity for our dealers to serve their communities. And, clearly a lot of them have relationships with hospitals or health clinics, but also other things, like food banks. I mean, food banks are being utilized more now than ever. And so for volunteers in these food banks to have access to PPE, proper face shields, masks, those types of things is really important. And so our dealers are so well connected in their communities and do such a wonderful job supporting all of these causes. There was a real natural fit there. So again, the team's just done an amazing job. We were able to find room within our plant so we can restart the engine production as we've done and still continue to build these face shields. That's been a really good experience. We've also partnered with GE in the US to make ventilators, and we're making respirators, and Canada has access to these as required as well. So it's nice to have a backstop there in terms of safety equipment and PPE.
Well, that's to you and your team and everyone at Ford, because I think that's just a great story, and we need to see more of that, obviously, if we're getting through things like this. Tell me, what does the future hold for Ford?
Well, so it's funny because we spend so much time. It's so nice when we have a meeting now where it's not all about the COVID-19. We've actually got such an exciting year ahead of us, and we've kind of lost sight of that in the here and now. But we're launching a lot of new products this year. We're launching an all-new F-150 this year. F-150 is been the best-selling pickup truck in Canada for longer than I've been alive. It's incredible to have a product that it's actually the best-selling vehicle in Canada as well. And so it's a really important launch for us. And we've got an all-new F-150. It's going to have a hybrid electric powertrain for the first time ever. So we're really excited about that. And that'll be coming into the market in the next few months. We've got our first battery electric vehicle, the Mustang Mach-E, launching later this year. So again, a really exciting product. And then we've got the Bronco family of vehicles. We've got a couple of really exciting vehicles in that Bronco family that are also launching later this year. So, we're still very busy at work around these. Now the launches are different. We're not doing the usual bringing all the media in. It's done virtually. And so we're kind of working through how we're going to still break through and get our message out there. But we're really excited about bringing these vehicles to market. In Oakville, we just announced a new Edge ST line this week, which is a new derivative that we're producing there. Really exciting, sporty model. So there's a lot of really exciting things going on the product side as well. And so there's better days ahead as we can get back into the role of launching these great products.
How does the auto sector look in general in Canada? I mean, we have the new, I don't know what you want to call it, NAFTA deal that's coming into play. What is that? How do things bode for the auto sector across Canada?
Yeah, so NAFTA is critical, and we were big proponents working with governments on both sides of the border, and actually all three countries to get the new NAFTA agreement signed and in place. We very much operate without borders. We have components that cross the border multiple times. We've got suppliers on both sides of the border. It's really critical to our industry to have those open borders and that cooperation. I mean, the industry in Canada has been very healthy. We had a peak industry just a few years ago, 2017. We're a 2 million unit industry, which was an all-time high. We've come off that slightly over the last couple of years, but just by a few percentage points. And most of that has been the shift in vehicles. We're seeing people shift out of passenger cars into SUVs and trucks. And so, although the market's come down a few percentage points over the last few years, SUV sales are up, truck sales are up. It's really been cars, which now account this year to date. I think it's less than 20% of the industry is the kind of traditional passenger car. So we've pivoted our product lineup very much where the market is going, which is good news, and we're seeing that in our market share as we're getting some gains. So, the fundamentals are or were very strong for the Canadian market. It remains to be seen as we come out of this, and we're very much working with the government now on ways to kickstart the economy and get it going. We're looking at things like maybe a scrappage or like a cash for clunkers program, which 30% of the vehicles on the road in Canada are 12 years or older. If we can get those vehicles off the road into much cleaner vehicles that will reduce greenhouse gas. We're talking about tax holidays. When I was in China, the government there twice did basically a VAT tax holiday on new vehicle sales, and it really created a demand. And as we get those car sales going, I mean, that helps suppliers. It's a big part of the GDP of Ontario and Canada. So I think the fundamentals are there. Clearly there's going to be a lot of difficulties coming out of the COVID-19, and the sooner we can get that economy going in a safe way. I'm certainly, we need to do this the right way. It can't be reckless, but in a very safe way, which I believe our government is committed to. I think that the future outlook is very strong.
We only have a couple minutes left, Dean, but I did want to get in some questioning around the autonomous vehicle issue. How close are we to seeing autonomous vehicles on our roads here in Oakville?
Well, it's still going to be some time. I mean, I think, as we've looked at the autonomous vehicle, there's a lot of excitement over the technology around it. And I think what we'll see is more autonomous features. So we have something called Copilot 360 in many of our new Ford and Lincoln vehicles, which has all kinds of autonomous features. So the vehicle almost drives itself, but you're still in the driver's seat, and the driver still clearly has a role to play. I think the use cases for fully autonomous vehicles are probably different. I think we'll see more in terms of package delivery, more in shuttle services, airport shuttles, taxi service. That's going to come sooner than kind of individual fully autonomous vehicles. So I think it's still some way off, but all that technology is, I mean, we're innovating in that space, and all that's going to, trickle down or creep into the vehicles that we're all buying today and tomorrow. So it's still a really exciting space to watch.
Dean, it's been great having you on. I look forward, perhaps sometime we can do this again, only maybe we can do it in a Mustang instead of doing this virtually.
I hope so. I look forward to it. We've certainly got the weather here, so I look forward to that, Tim, and thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
It's great. It's great having you here locally, and we're really pleasure to speak with you. So thanks again.
Well, it's my pleasure, my honor. I'm speaking on behalf of a whole bunch of amazingly talented and committed people. So it's my honor to represent them today. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next conversation will take place June 3rd at noon, and we have a very special guest lined up for you. We're not going to tell you right now who that is. You'll just have to wait to see. So to everyone watching on Facebook Live, Zoom, and on Your TV, thanks for tuning in. And I wanted to give a special shout out to our crew here at Your TV for combining all of this technology to make sure that we can get this program on smoothly. Have a productive and safe day.